Good evening and welcome to the 2024 Annual Salvesen Lecture. I am Professor Kim Graham and I am the Provost here at the University of Edinburgh, meaning I serve as the University's Chief Academic Officer. This evening it is my great pleasure to introduce our 6th Annual Salvesen Lecture, delivered by Lotta Borg Skoglund. Dr. Skoglund is a Senior Consultant Physician, trained in general medicine and psychiatry, and an associate professor in psychiatry at the Department of Women's and Children's Health at Uppsala University and the Department of Clinical Neuroscience at the Karolinska Institute. Lotta has a specific interest in and is a leading expert on girls and women with ADHD and autism. Most of what is known about the challenges of living with a neurodivergent brain comes from research conducted around boys and men, she says. Girls and young women with these conditions mask their difficulties and compensate with energy-consuming strategies, but they are not invisible if we know what to ask for and what to listen to. Lotta Borg Skoglund believes ADHD symptoms in women have been and still are misinterpreted, and will present her inspiring research challenging outdated views on female ADHD and highlight the knowledge gaps in ADHD for women and girls. Collaboration across boundaries, professional as well as geographic, is at the heart of the two Salvesen Mindroom centres who are hosting tonight's inspiring lecture. The Charity and Research Centre's collaborative working generates research that builds on real-world issues, addresses key community priorities, and delivers critical impact in practice. We are very grateful to Lotta for recording this lecture so that we can broadcast her work around the globe. Each year, hundreds of people watch the annual Salvesen Lecture during the broadcast, with thousands more viewing the recorded lecture later. It's an excellent contribution to our growing archive of public talks. So without further ado, I will now hand over to Lotta Borg Skoglund for this year's Salvesen Lecture. ADHD symptoms in women aren't hidden, they are misinterpreted.
Hi, my name is Lotta Borg Skoglund. I'm an associate professor in psychiatry and a psychiatrist from Uppsala University in Sweden. I'm so grateful to be giving the Salvesen Lecture 2024. So thank you so much, the Salvesen Mindroom Research Centre and Edinburgh University, for inviting me here. And thank you for allowing the neurodivergent girls and women to be the center of our attention the upcoming 45 minutes. Just give me 1 second and I will share the slide deck that I will present to you today, because I would like to talk to you about ADHD symptoms and actually neurodivergent symptoms, including also symptoms of ADHD, ADD, and autism in women not being hidden, but rather misinterpreted. And first of all, just a short anecdote of how I got interested in this topic about neurodivergency, women, and hormones. Because I was working as a clinician, I was meeting so many women. Actually, I met so many women telling me about their experiences of being different, of feeling alone, of feeling abandoned by the healthcare system, that I decided to write a book about it. A book that is now also translated actually into English, calling ADHD Girls to Women, Getting on the Radar. But I felt that we had a very interesting and fruitful discussion about ADHD symptoms, about the overlap between other symptoms within neurodiversity. But I also picked up on a lot of the girls and women that I met, talking about being very sensitive to hormones, talking about not tolerating hormonal contraceptives, for example, feeling extremely vulnerable and challenged in certain periods of life, and how that tended to overlap actually with hormonal periods and periods of hormonal change across the female reproductive span. So I called my dear friend from med school, Helena Kopp-Kallner, an associate professor in gynecology. And I asked her, can we have a lunch? And we started talking about the overlap between our two different domains of medicine. But it really started off by Helena being really, really upset about a subset of her patients that she felt that she really couldn't reach, and that no matter what she did, it seemed, at least for Helena, that these women didn't really want to get better. So she said to me, there's this group of women who says that they get depressed or get anxiety from hormonal contraceptives, for example. And, there's no research supporting their claims. And they can also say that they don't tolerate the IUDs and the hormonal levels in hormonal IUDs, they are so low, they shouldn't really feel anything from that. And it's also like they're so super urgent to get an appointment in my office. And when it's time for the appointment, they don't even show up. And when we agree on certain treatment strategies, it seems like they don't care because they don't follow what we have agreed upon. And Helena said, this must be something, wrong with these women, right, Lotta? Because then you're a psychiatrist, you probably know this. Probably they have some kind of personality disorder, perhaps. And I said, well, Helena, they may, of course, have personality disorders, all of these women. I haven't met them, but I would assume, and from what you are telling me, it seems like it's a huge overlap between what my girls and women in my ADHD clinic is actually telling me about how they perceive their ADHD, their relationship to the healthcare system, and also how they react on hormones across their lifespan. So we got talking about this, and we actually decided to start up a research group, because when we dived into the research, there was none, almost none, and it's getting better. And I'm going to go through the research that we actually have today. But spoiler alert, there will be a lot of gaps here. And for us, I think all of us to fill. Because how come when 51% of all humans on this world, on this globe, are women, how come 0.5% of the neuroimaging research studies are made on women? How can Helena and I help our patients when there is such a lack of research, such a lack of interest, really, to understand how the female brain evolves and remodels across the reproductive lifetime? And this is what we are going to talk about, and this is where I would like to put neurodivergent women into this context. So, first of all, neurodiversity. Who, how, why, and what? Well, neurodiversity, and then we are talking about all this huge family of diagnosis of ADHD, ADD, autism, but also learning disorder, intellectual disabilities, tics, Tourette's. Well, So when we bunk up all of them together, it is really common, up to 10% of all children will actually have so much difficulties with one or another of these traits in this neurodiversity group of disorders that they qualify for a diagnosis, for a formal diagnosis. And of course, even more will be subthreshold, but also within the neurodiversity spectrum. For adults, it's about 4 to 5%, so really common. And it's not a choice. And looking at the data and the research done today, we know with certainty that neurodiversity and neurodevelopmental disorders are explained to a large degree by genetic factors. That does not make environmental factors less important, though, and that is of course, an extremely important message to get across. But it's serious also, just by fulfilling the 4 letters for ADHD. ADHD, 4 letters, will reduce your life expectancy with 8 to 13 years if you don't get the adequate support and treatment that you have the right to get. And broadening, I said I would like to broaden the perspective of not just looking at girls and women with ADHD, but also introduce, at least for me, this was a new concept, the ADHD. And I'm not really sure how to pronounce it, but I think it's ADHD or ADHD. What is that? Well, I think that's a step towards the perspective of neurodiversity, because it is actually really common that different neurodivergent or neurodevelopmental disorders overlap in the same individual. For ADHD, 15 to 20% actually also have traits of autism, and over 10% will qualify for a full autism diagnosis. And in autism, the comorbidity or the overlap with ADHD is even bigger. So 50 to 70% also have ADHD. This is as common as it is, wasn't really possible to diagnose the two disorders in the same individual before 2013, when we went from the DSM-4 to the DSM-5. Obviously, that was done, but that has severely influenced and delayed the research on neurodiversity and the overlap. And I will suggest to you a way of looking at ADHD and autism and the underlying neuropsychological processes that we are actually struggling with here when we are fulfilling one, two of these disorders or more in the neurodivergent family. They're not really distinct. So it seems like there are common genetic and environmental factors influencing the both disorders. So the overlap, they seem to share common genetic factors. And it's important, even though it can be messy to try to disentangle what is what, it is important to name and to try to be as detailed as possible when we are doing this diagnostic procedure, because having both ADHD and autism actually makes you more impaired and makes it even more important that you get the adequate support and resources and interventions for both disorders. I would like you to meet Emilia. So Emilia is one of my patients. She's now 19, maybe she's turned 20 as we speak. But she got her ADHD diagnosis when she was 19, and she got her autism diagnosis now. And I think that came a year after. So yes, she's 20 now. But before she got her ADHD diagnosis, she had qualified for 10 other psychiatric diagnoses. She was also treated for them. And I will show you some data from our latest research called Time After Time, where we see a diagnostic delay in girls and women and how they collect comorbid conditions and polypharmacy, medication after medication, the 5 years leading up to their diagnosis. So this is extremely important. This is pressing. This is something that is common still. So many women and girls with ADHD say that they have to fight and they have to argue to be understood and to actually get a proper assessment, and finally to get a diagnosis, to get the correct explanatory model and their own functional map of their brain. And this seems to me, following so many of these girls and women before and then after they were actually diagnosed, it is a mystery for me, because when you get the correct understanding of how your own brain is wired and why certain things become so difficult for you while other things can be done with such an ease, you can take so much more responsibility for your own situation. You can actually relieve the healthcare system a lot by becoming a patient with more knowledge about yourself and about your specific conditions. So this is a mystery. And when you don't get the right explanatory model, then many girls and women, neurodiverse girls and women, they will testify to having to try to mask or cope or struggle with their difficulties. And in our research, in our qualitative research, the first thing that comes up when we ask women about what is most impairing and scary with their situation, the first thing that comes up is that I feel so different and I feel completely alone and I feel completely abandoned. So many women, starting from young age, start to hide these precious and this secret about themselves, about them being flawed, about them being different. And unfortunately, we around them, we mean well when we try to normalize saying, well, you know, everyone feels stressed out before a math test, and you know, everyone can feel left out when the other girls go to football practice and you have to go home and because you're so tired. And you know, we try to normalize things that neurodivergent girls actually tell us, and that is when we miss them. So no, their symptoms are not hidden, but yes, often they are misinterpreted. Feeling different, feeling alone, feeling abandoned, having to cope, finding strategies that can be so tough on you, so energy consuming. And that also fails when you walk across a life, moving through different stages of life. And this is also a point where we miss the girls. We don't see them and we don't see their coping strategies. We don't see the young girls feeling so stressed out in school that she start prioritizing down the social life that she has, or that starts controlling what she eats and how she exercises and when she studies, building a prison for herself. Rather than living a life and getting help and support for her neurodiverse brain. And also, when we talk to girls and women, they can describe life from a very early age as an uphill struggle. And we will get back to the consequences of that when the neurodivergent girls, when they fall off our radar. Because we know that girls on a group level at an earlier age know what's expected of them. So they will start coping, they will start masking, and they will start finding energy consuming strategies. And they have less externalizing symptoms. So they are more often and misdiagnosed, but they do have these social difficulties. They are more exposed to bullying and their self-esteem is sinking. We can see the academic difficulties if we listen to what they're saying. I feel so stupid. It's like nothing sticks in my head and I feel so stressed out, and not just try to normalize and praise them for how good they are. And also we know that even though the externalizing symptoms may not be visible in school or outside because they know what the outside world expects of them, when parents describe their daughters, they will often describe it totally different girl. So sometimes you can wonder if it's the same girl that you have actually gotten a description of from the teachers and from the parents. The tantrums, the meltdowns at home, the siblings perhaps not daring to take home friends because they can be so violent and so loud at home. And unfortunately, at an early age, these neurodivergent girls will start expressing symptoms of comorbidity already: depression, anxiety, eating disorders. And when we move into the neurodivergent young women, they will be straight under our noses. They will be reaching out for help with their comorbidities in the transition from the puberty, from being a girl to becoming a young woman. And then, as we will get back to, the extreme and dramatic changes going on in these young women's brains. The brain is actually remodeled to fit another context, another life, from being a child to becoming a young woman and entering the reproductive part of life, where you will have dramatically fluctuating hormonal level every month until perimenopause and menopause. So this transition is not just biological, but also has a lot of social implications, obviously, and existential implications. And these young women, these adolescent women with ADHD, with autism, they will be, and they will tell us that they become increasingly impaired. And where emotional regulation will come up high on their list of why life is so difficult. But they will probably not come to us saying, I think I have ADHD or I think I have autism, but rather they will come with symptoms that we interpret as depression, anxiety, different kind of eating disorders, different kinds of addictions. And we know that both girls and boys will start smoking at an earlier age. They will start drinking at an earlier age. And if we don't find them, the risk is way higher for these adolescents to actually develop problems with addictions. And me and Helena, what we could talk about this group of women that we see in our youth clinics that comes due to sexual risk-taking. And no wonder if you have spent your entire childhood trying to be accepted, trying to be liked, trying to be loved. And you develop into a young woman and you realize that sexuality is actually a currency here. So pairing that up with the risk of also using alcohol or drugs in a harmful way, this is a recipe actually for victimization, for trauma, and for sexual risk-taking that we see the consequences of in abortions, sexual transmitted diseases, and teenage pregnancies. And these young adult women will, of course, grow into neurodivergent adult women. And then what we hear from the women is when their strategies fail them. So again, moving across an entire lifetime, building up strategies that fail when you enter a new phase of your life. The hormonal periods, we know now from recent research how the brain remodels across periods of puberty, pregnancy, postpartum, and perimenopause, the 4 Ps, the 4 periods of importance. And then across every menstrual cycle, where the hormones fluctuate so dramatically, affecting both how women feel, how they experience their life, and how they behave, or we behave. And we know that women with ADHD and autism, they experience more riskful pregnancies and more often have premature births. And they also more often develop postpartum depressions. They more often suffer from PMS and PMDD and PMDS. And it seems like they are more challenged across perimenopause and menopause. So in periods where hormones are shifting, it seems like neurodivergent women are especially vulnerable. And then you come to the life, to relationships and to work, getting this work-life balance in order. It becomes so much more difficult when your brain is not wired according to the norm, according to how we have designed our society, our workplaces to fit the neurotypical people, 90% of the people in the society. And obviously, many of the women that I meet have chosen to become parents. And we know from research, again, that neurodivergent women, they experience another level of parental-related stress. Feeling judged, feeling that they are criticized by people from within the healthcare systems, by their healthcare providers, as well as people around them in their society. And many of these women will also age, and we know with certainty now that it should be around 2 to 3% of all women over 65 years of age should qualify for an autism or an ADHD or ADD diagnosis, for example. Still, when it comes to ADHD, about 0.3 to 0.5% actually have a formal diagnosis. So many women will live an entire life without the correct explanatory model for why life can be so much more difficult for them than for other people. You will experience the same difficulties, but when life goes on, of course, new challenges. So difficulties of living without being able to trust your own abilities, also perhaps struggling in relationships with low self-esteem. You may end up having difficulties in sustaining your relationship over time. And then, as we said, not being supported for your neurodiverse profile, for your neurodiverse difficulties, cost life. Because of somatic and psychiatric comorbidities. So really important, and I meet a lot of women who come to me in their 60s and 70s for a diagnosis, and the beauty of traveling through an assessment towards a diagnosis with them is striking. And the thing that keeps coming up when you talk to these women is actually how many times they have fallen, how many times they have failed and just gotten up again. So kudos to all women who have lived an entire life without the right explanatory model and still just never give up, just getting back up on the horse again. And that is that's really rewarding to work in this with these women. So I told you about our latest study. We call it Time After Time, and it's a population-based Swedish study with almost 40,000 ADHD females. And what we saw here is that there is a diagnostic delay in females of 4 years. So boys and men get a 4-year head start on understanding themselves within this neurodiverse paradigm, getting support, getting treatment, and being able to engage in self-care. And what we see is when we look 5 years prior to getting the ADHD diagnosis, how girls and women start developing comorbidities, anxiety, depression, eating disorders. And how we in the healthcare system, we see them everywhere. So they seek our help and we start treating them for everything. So a lot of medication, they're overrepresented in all the groups of medication that we could look at. And that goes for also pain medication and for anxiety medications and for sleep medications and for tranquilizers. So not getting your ADHD diagnosis actually exposes you for comorbidities and for polypharmacy and for a massive healthcare utilization. So for all of them, the people that I meet that questions the focus on female neurodiversity and say that it is expensive and that we need to save the resources for other disorders, other diagnoses as well. I do agree there are other diagnoses than ADHD and autism, but these women, they're already our patients. So we might as well give them the proper attention and correct diagnosis and treatment that they deserve, because otherwise they will keep on moving around in our healthcare system, searching for answers, or go online searching for pseudoscience explanations, putting themselves and their health at risk. And this is just a table showing that in our research, in our sample here, we could see that 50% of the women with ADHD actually had a comorbid anxiety disorder. And when you look at males with ADHD, that was only half, so 25%, 26% of the males. So it seems like women with ADHD, they are mis and undiagnosed due to their ADHD symptoms being mis or misinterpreted, that their symptoms change across life and across year, and that they mask and compensate, and that comorbidity also might set us off on the wrong trajectory. And I guess just to kind of drum in this message that undiagnosed and untreated ADHD in women, it is expensive, not only for the individual and her loved ones, but also for society. Look at this. Over 30% of the women with ADHD had 6 or more visits in non-psychiatric outpatient care every year. And how can this be? Well, as I told you, there has been extremely little research done on the specific phenotype of being a woman. And you can kind of, I always get a little bit curious about this because I have gotten used to actually in research now that it's mandatory for you to explain why, if you don't include 50% women, 50% men in a study, you're supposed to motivate that. You're supposed to explain why you have this skewed sex or gender distribution. Still, including now women in studies on mental health care, it seems like we don't really think about why they are included, because we don't assess if they are before or after puberty, or where they are in their menstrual cycle, or if they are in pregnancy or postpartum, or if they are in the years around perimenopause, because we know that the estrogen levels, the progesterone levels will start changing, and the brain will start redistributing, remodeling. We actually know that for Amelia, she will have an increased risk for developing stress, depression, anxiety, abuse, binge eating, psychosis, even mania and suicide in certain periods of her menstrual cycle. Still, almost no one in research or in clinical practice will ask her about her hormonal status when she seeks help for mental health issues. And I would like to introduce you now to a concept that broadens the perspective and helps us to understand how we actually can see and listen to and find the girls, because they are not hidden. They are maybe explaining, however, their symptoms in a slightly different way. And they might also be displaying their symptoms in a slightly different way, because 95% of research done on ADHD and autism is actually done on pre-pubertal boys. So another sex and sex without these dramatically fluctuating hormonal levels. So I would like to introduce you to the neurodiverse brain, where instead of focusing on these fancy words that neuropsychologists use about how the brain functions and how we interpret information from the world around us and from our own bodies, we can call that executive functions. You may have heard of metacognition. You may have heard of central coherence, impulsivity, emotional regulation, perception, proprioception, perhaps cognitive flexibility. Fancy words, things that we can measure in neuropsychological testing, but also something that we can actually talk about. And I have borrowed a lot of really clever ways of using metaphors for how impaired, for different neuropsychological impairments and difficulties and challenges in neurodiversity can actually be explained and understood. And you don't have to be a psychiatrist and a neuropsychologist. So let's start with the neurodiverse brain and the ability to overview things. And then we will start in the frontal lobes of our brains. We will start with the brain's control tower. So then we will ask Anja to explain how her ADHD autistic brain functions. And Anja will tell us that she gets so tired from just a regular day at school, because in her brain, it is like she is living on a huge international airport where airplanes from the entire world comes in and takes off to the entire world, and everything has to be so extremely well coordinated in order for not really serious accidents to happen. So Anya, she feels a lot of stress because she has no one who works for her in her control tower. She can never put any of these extremely complex relationships in her everyday life on autopilot. She has to do everything manually, and it drains her of energy. And just being out on a recess, actually outside of class, and there are so many impressions that she has to coordinate and that she has to do that manually. So she's absolutely wasted after so tired after a day in school that there's no possibility for her to go to basketball training or hang out with her friends. She has to go straight home, just lie down in a dark room, trying to recharge her batteries until everything starts all over again tomorrow. So first thing we have to remember, difficulties in the brain's control tower has nothing to do with intelligence. The next area in the brain is our reward systems. Deep down in the brain, the dopamine regulation, where Anya will say that there's like, I have no servo. It can just get stuck on the minimum level, and it's impossible to get out of bed. It's impossible to get anything done. I know I should, and I know I will feel so much better once I've done it, but it's impossible. But she'll also tell us that just as easily, her volume button can turn up to 100 to maximum, and it's impossible to stop. It is so much fun. The chocolate tastes so deliciously. Just have to watch another, just one more YouTube clip. It is impossible for her to stop. And again, we know that this is obviously is well described when it comes to ADHD for difficulties in regulating your energy and activity levels. But Anya will say that it's also a lot to do with, yes, her energy levels across the day, but also her appetite, her sleep, and her emotions. Okay, area number 3, when we want to understand neurodivergent women, is the broken virus filter. So then again, ask Anya, why is it so difficult to be you? She will say, well, my brain, it's like a huge, imagine if your email box would just, if the virus filter would just go out of order. So all emails, all the spam would just, go in there, just like flood your entire inbox. And you will start getting so confused and so stressed out on what emails are extremely important that you adhere or attend to straight away and answer straight away. What can wait? And what emails should you definitely not open because there might be a virus in it and it might destroy your entire hard drive. So for Anya, this is how she experiences life. All the stimuli from the external world gets straight into her head, makes her so tired, but also the stimuli from her own body. So how the clothes feel on her body. Is it too warm? Is it too cold? Is it too dark? Is it too light? It smells differently. Everything, all these stimuli kind of adds up into her hard drive, requiring process speed from her brain's hard drive. And she gets so tired. And the last area that Anya tries to explain for us why her neurodivergent brain struggles so much and why she has a harder time going through school and life than others. Is her gearbox, the brain's gearbox, because Anya can say that she can decide to just, she'll decide, I will drive on gear 1 today. But then it's so much harder, it seems, for her than for her peers to change gear when what she's doing is no longer working, when she needs to find another strategy. Or when she has this intoxicating negative thoughts that, it just goes on and on, ruminating about embarrassing moments 10 years ago. It's really, really, really difficult to be comfortable in social situations when you have this negative self-talk and being reminded of these awkward situations where you've made a fool of yourself, or you think you've made a fool of yourself anyway. And getting stuck in negative loops of thoughts, just poisoning your mind, basically. So these 4 areas for Anya. And the interesting thing is where we know now that during puberty, during pregnancy and perimenopause, when women are told that, well, this is just, you're just imagining things because there's no research supporting what you're actually telling me now about your symptoms, about your difficulties, and about your perhaps ADHD symptoms or or autistic symptoms becoming worse in certain periods of life or in certain hormonal periods. It's just all in your head. Well, you want to know what? It is all in your head, because we now know from excellent work, and if I can recommend some popular science book except my own, I would say read everything that Dr. Lisa Mosconi has written about the female brain and about vulnerable periods of life and about the remodeling that they can show actually in their research now going on in hormonal periods of life. So no wonder that our patients, that mine and Helena's patients, are describing all of this. And no wonder when 0.7 or 0.5 of the neuroimaging studies are done on women, that we can't really guide them. So we have to mind this gap. The important thing and the fun thing of doing research in this way that we do is actually that we involve the patients themselves. And if there's time, I will just shortly describe our latest venture, building the Letter Life app. The letters, the ADHD, 4 letters, ADD, 3 letters, OCD, 3 letters, PMS, 3 letters, ASD, also 3 letters. But the life that we live with all these different letters, it doesn't really matter what kind of diagnosis you have. If you identify into the neurodivergent family, the Letter Life app is supposed to help you navigate all these different areas of life, connecting the dots for women, for neurodivergent women. And I hope I'll have time to just show you briefly how the work is done there. But the research behind the work is actually very hands-on patient public involvement, and we are absolutely convinced that this is the way to go, because when we know that self-efficient, engaged, and proactive patients, and I would say neurodivergent women kind of fits this description especially well. But when they are seen and heard, and when we listen to them, and when we actually use their experiences, it seems like they feel and function better, and they cost less, and they live longer. So win, win, win again. And we have something to learn about, I think, from the diversity movement overall. This full-on letter life, because there are more letters, LGBTQIA+, right? And we know that these divergencies are coexistent. So neurodivergent women with autism and ADHD, they're more common also, part of the LGBTQIA community. Maybe this calls for a more open mind. Maybe you have had to question societal norms, gender roles, and maybe then you're also more open towards the identity of others. That is my experience, at least. Maybe you've also had to stand your ground, to challenge norm, and to fight, to get acceptance for who you are. And maybe you've had also to struggle and to experience stress and stigma from this dual identity and from hiding from who you are. It's also an experience shared with across the neurodiversity and LGBTQIA communities. So I think we have a lot of things to learn from each other and support each other, and the overlap actually is really great. So I promised you that I would try to explain to you what I think is missing today and what we're trying to do about it. And then I would welcome you into the university, or the world of letter life. Because in our research, we have identified 3 key areas of concern. I've already told you about the first thing that girls and women, neurodivergent girls and women say when we ask them what is the most problematic thing in your life, is that I feel alone, I feel ashamed, maybe, and I feel abandoned. And then you have to remember that these girls and women, according to our research, are the same women that are seeking healthcare, utilizing so much more healthcare resources than other. So they are getting some kind of attention, but they're getting the wrong attention because you feel alone and abandoned, and that you get no help and no support. The other area that we have identified is that it is so difficult to connect the dots, to understand how my hormones affect my neurodivergent symptoms, my ADHD or autistic symptoms, and how that is tied into my lifestyle factors. If I sleep well, if I eat adequately, if I exercise, how come will alcohol affect my mood and my relationships and my stress, work-life balance? This is all tied together in a really complex individual functional map for each and every neurodivergent woman, but it's extremely difficult when you add on the hormonal fluctuations across life. Very often blurs the picture and make it so much more difficult to understand what's actually going on. And then the third area would be what we've been talking about, that the research and the clinical expertise about female-specific symptoms is so limited still. So what we have tried is to address these 3 core areas in this app, Letter Life, available in English and in Swedish and soon in Danish. And we actually have today 1,300 premium subscriber. So you have a free version and then you have a paid version. And what we're trying to do together is create a community of equals for recognition and for support. So to solve the key problem of being alone and feeling abandoned, we have created a supportive community where you can share your expertise, you can get advice and tips from your equals, and you can team up with a matched body or with curated communities that discuss things that are relevant for you. And it is such a beautiful community, I have to tell you. And I thought that maybe when we were exceeding 1,000 members, that we would have to go in and moderate and curate the community, but it's just love and support for one another. So really, really heartwarming to be a part of this beautiful community. The second thing that we wanted to adhere to and attend to and to solve for women, for neurodivergent women, is a feeling of not being able to connect the dots, a feeling of being crazy, also being told that it's all in your head and you're just imagining things. Trying to help women to understand themselves and to predict periods or days where you may be especially vulnerable due to hormonal changes. And so in absence of research, we have to be our own scientists. We have to collect our own data. And this is what we can do here in Letter Life. You get daily questions, you can log your data, you can track your personal stats, and you can identify trends in your behaviors, in your mood, and how you're functioning in everyday life. And you can actually send messages to your future self, because when you identify these patterns, you can start predicting in the future the days that lay ahead where you might have PMS, or when you might be extra vulnerable for other reasons. You might predict when you have had trouble sleeping for a couple of days. The app will remind you to be more self-compassionate, to be extra attentive to what you eat, to try to exercise in moderation. So we are trying to help ourselves here by collecting our own data, and we're not crazy. We can see trends, and it's beautiful when you do that, when you understand that, and when you can use this empowering data and empowering knowledge to increase self-efficacy. And you are important. So the third key area where we want to support and we wanted to solve for women, neurodivergent women, is the lack of knowledge out there. And so we wanted to become or be a trustworthy source of knowledge. And we do that in two different ways. We have created what we call the Mind Hub. So that is a knowledge bank with evidence-based knowledge, bite-sized to fit the ADHD and the autistic brain. There are lectures, there are my favorite Whiteboard Wednesdays, where I get a question from some of you, some of the users, and I have 3 minutes to try to explain that in front of a whiteboard. Very prestigious, very low tech, but again, a community where we support each other and we try to provide the best knowledge out there today. And then we have the Ask the Expert. So you can anytime ask any of our experienced experts anything about ADHD, autism, neurodiversity overall, and you will get an answer within 24 hours. Really, really rewarding and exciting to work with this, and such a supportive community that we have created here. So we hope that we were actually beginning to predict the future here by collaborating with the users and co-creating, because what we are doing here, we are iterating on the users' needs and feedback every day. So we just build and build and build whatever you tell us to build. This is precision medicine, and this is the future. And as I said, if people are haunting me about me ranting about the importance of acknowledging and supporting neurodivergent women, I say, well, they are already our patients, so we might as well work with what we have. Seconding, and then also the first lady, the prior for our former first lady Michelle Obama, saying that the measure of any society is how we treat our girls and women. I would also say that when we focus on girls and women's health, preventing the negative outcomes will improve health in generations to come. So make sure that you are prepared when you see your healthcare providers. Make sure that you are armored with the best possible knowledge, perhaps from the Letter Life community and Mind Hub, to be able to self-advocate, because you will have to do that. The knowledge is still really, really scarce out there, and there are still few professionals who master both the hormonal aspects and the neurodiversity aspects of girls and women. And as I said, we have actually it is a great interest for Letter Life, and we are gaining traction, and we are building the community, and it feels almost like we're part of a movement here. Hopefully, this is we can contribute to spark this journey towards more knowledge and more research on female neurodiversity, and hope also to actually acknowledge that sometimes we do feel like Kermit, passed out, needing a day to prepare or recover for the day that was, and to prepare for the day to come. And trying to understand, listening to Anja talking about how her brain processes information and receives information from the world around her and from her own body, focusing on the brain's control tower, the volume button, the virus filter, and the gearbox. I think passed out Kermit here is perfectly on topic, actually. And 4 tips, just to sum up and to end this talk. I'd like to send 4 tips to you, or to your daughters, or to your loved ones, or to your girlfriends and wives and partners and mothers. How can you support Anja's control tower? Well, what you always can do is to understand how girls and women with ADHD and autism are struggling to keep everything together, and how frustrating it is when someone says, well, you have to relax, you have to just let go, you have to live a little. that is actually equivalent to letting two jumbo jets collide on your brain's airport. So instead, a much better approach is to actually jump in and to be a stand-in officer in the control tower, being structured, calm, and to communicate clear expectations and to follow them up. Okay, so how can you then support a problematic servo in the volume button? Well, you can act as a good example of how to avoid the extremes. Remember the ADHD brain getting stuck on minimum volume or getting stuck on maximum volume. Try to together find out when you are actually in this perfect middle zone between 40 and 60. You don't want to be around 0 to 10. You don't want to be 90 to 100. You can be there. You can actually gas up, and you can slow down and be in those extremes for a short while. But when you realize that you've been there for a long time, find ways to get yourself back to moderation. And that goes for all the lifestyle factors: the diet, the exercise, sleep, work-life balance, moderation. That is the most difficult thing when you're a neurodiverse woman, in my experience anyway. And you can help reinforcing the filter, limit the impressions of stimuli, and help someone schedule recovery. We often forget that. We think that, well, then it's the weekend and then, you're off from school. But you may have to schedule recovery within your normal schedule. When you have a neurodivergent brain with this energy drainage going on 24/7. And you can try to help someone also grease the gearbox. If you have a lot of difficulties with rumination and worrying and getting stuck with a poisoned mind, you can try to practice, for example, setting or appointing a worrying time during the day. Maybe I do it at the same time when I do my exercise, because when I'm moving, I tend to feel a little less anxious. So then I say to myself, when these worrying thoughts try to grab my mind, that I will definitely focus 100% of ruminating around this awkward situation or this embarrassment that I have just caused someone or myself. I will absolutely 100% focus on that at 5 p.m. this evening. Between 5 p.m. and 6 p.m., my brain will be absolutely absorbed with this. I will write it down on a note, and then I will tell myself again and again and again to let it go and wait until worrying time. And again, moderation, and again, many different tools. Remembering how neurodivergent women often get stuck on one strategy and try to use that to an extent that can be actually really harmful for them when it comes to over-exercising, developing eating disorders, for example, or workaholism. So be aware of the importance of having different strategies and move between strategies. So in summary, neurodiverse girls, they are not on our radar, but they are there. They're not missed, and they're misinterpreted because of their less externalizing symptoms, but they do have externalizing symptoms at home. They do have social and academic difficulties. They have bullying. They develop this sinking self-esteem, moving in to these vulnerable years of adolescence, these existential years of becoming a young adult. Developing comorbidities and risk-taking and victimization, and the paradox of us missing them again because we focus on the trauma, we focus on the adverse outcomes, we focus on their comorbidities. And then becoming adult neurodiverse women going through these reproductive periods of life where the brain actually remodels, experiencing the parental stress, the difficulties in managing the work-life balance, and then aging, going through perimenopause with this remodeling of the brain again. And so little research and so little understanding from the healthcare system and from people around you. So a true challenge. And I'd like to just end with this quote from Berkami that I think is a great way of just summarizing what neurodiverse women actually tell us. That most people don't understand that some people use enormous amount of energy just to be normal. And thanks to my research group, to Helena Kopp-Kallner, who I told you about, and to Professor in psychology, Lisa Berlin-Torell, both at Karolinska Institutet, Stockholm, Sweden, and our Goddess ADHD research group, gender-informed research to overcome diagnostic delay, empowering self-awareness and self-efficacy in female ADHD. Thank you so much for listening, and please go into letterlife.se and check it out and join our empowering movement and community there. Again, thank you, Salvesen Mindroom Research Center, Edinburgh University, for allowing me and the neurodivergent girls and women to have such an important role today.
And I would like to firstly thank Provost Kim Graham for coming along this evening and giving us initial welcome. It was great that I was able to link and organize the university to set up the Salvesen Mindroom Research Centre, as I thought that it was so important that the University of Edinburgh helped to provide the necessary background research for which Mindroom was working. It's also great that we, for the last few years, have had Sue Fletcher-Watson running the Salvesen Mindroom Research Centre, and she now has 15 people working for her directly, and on top of that, there's a number of associates inside the Edinburgh University who are also linking in with what they did, what we do, so that the whole university becomes more and more involved. Of course, none of this would have happened if it hadn't been for Sophie Dow, who set up Mindroom in the first place. It was her inspiration that set it up, and I came in to assist her, and hence it has now changed its name into the Salvesen Mindroom Research Centre. Inside the Salvesen Mindroom Centre, we have the Alan Thornborough, who is leading it, and inside that there are 29 people full-time working who are trying to do the outreach and actually work with people with all sorts of different types of neurodiversity, helping not only the children themselves, but also their parents and their teachers to try and help them through the various different traumas that they face during their childhood. Many of these have been linked in tonight in what we've been hearing from Lotta. We likewise have Ed Chorlton, who's recently become the chairman of the Salvesen Mindroom Centre, and he has a great knowledge of the background of all sorts of businesses, especially the investment community. And many of these organizations themselves have problems of neurodiversity inside their organization. And the more that they understand and learn about this and how we can help them, and so we're trying to organize that they actually start linking in with us, and we can help teach them or encourage them to learn more about the subject, which will help their day-to-day operations. So that leads us to our main thanks that we come to, which is Lotta Borg Skoglund, who's come and given this inspiring lecture this evening. And what has to be recognized that only yesterday she was up in the north of Sweden, had to fly down to Stockholm and then on to Edinburgh so as to get here late last night in order to be here today to talk to us and give us her lecture. She's also during the day met many people from Salvesen Mindroom Centre so that they can relate to each other in more detail. The subject that she has chosen, it was the attention deficit hyperactive disorder in girls and women. Now, being a male, I can't fully understand all the subject matter because I suppose our hormones are somewhat different. And therefore, we're not affected in the same way. And as has been linked in, the hormones are, much of that is genetic and hereditary. They say about 80% of that comes in with. But anyway, I've learned quite a lot through listening to the lecture, and it tried to teach me a bit about my own daughter, because both my children were classed as having dyslexia, dyspraxia, and then ADHD. And the question is, are they on that autism spectrum, and if so, how far down it? But I always believe that if we could actually try and solve the problems of simple learning difficulties first and foremost, we can solve 80% of the problem, but then we have to move on to the more difficult, the neurodivergent problems. The actual subject itself has been absolutely fantastic. The way I can understand with my daughter, for example, how she links in directly and how she has had problems in her learning, initially being very outgoing, then becoming a little bit more insular, and sometimes struggling with her education, and likewise making friends and keeping them. Becoming very good friends and then losing them again is such a different things. The importance also that links in with what Lotta's been telling us, is how important it is for us all to work internationally, because in Sweden they've learned so many different things. And if we think of it, last year when we organized the ISCOM conference, we had 80 speakers coming from worldwide. And this international linkage is very important so that we can actually solve the problems far more quickly than we would do otherwise. So thank you very much, Lotta. You really helped us tonight, and thank you. Good evening.